Did you ever wonder what would have happened if new and old pirate generations fought each other? Does the new generation stand any chance against the legendary pirates of the One Piece world? Well, in order to answer that, I picked the 10 strongest pirates from each generation and split them into 5 stages. To make it simple, I'll start by revealing the first stage for both generations, and as the videos go on, I'll slowly keep adding more and more characters until we eventually reach the end where both generations will fight with their full strength. So, for starters, we have Luffy and Zoro on one side and Kaido and Big Mom on the other. Now, although Luffy vs Kaido is a matchup we've already seen, if they were to clash again, the fight would probably go a bit differently. This is mainly because Luffy would already know how to use Advanced Conqueror's Haki without having to take a beating first, and more importantly, he would have Gear 5 available from the get-go. Starting with Gear 5 is a game changer, as it would make his clash against Kaido go so much faster. However, even though Luffy is doing great, Zoro would seriously struggle against Big Mom. He did get much stronger after he learned to control Enma, but still, I don't think he's close to Big Mom's level of strength yet. After Zoro is defeated, Big Mom would be free to assist Kaido, and although Luffy was handling him pretty well so far, taking both Emperors at the same time would be impossible. After holding his own for some time, he would eventually get tired and lose. Okay, the new generation isn't off to a great start, but there's still many pirates ready to join the battle, and trust me, there will be a lot of surprises along the way. In the second stage, Kid and Law would arrive to assist the new generation. Did they stand any chance now? The obvious choice here would be to have Kid and Law go up against Big Mom because they already beat her once. However, there's a problem with that. You see, although they did technically win that fight, they didn't fully defeat her. Let me explain. So as Big Mom was falling off Onigashima, she looked like she still had the strength to keep on fighting. However, Law muted her so she couldn't call for her homies and ended up falling into a volcano. This time, they wouldn't have a convenient lava pool to dump Big Mom in, which is why I'm not completely sure if these two could actually beat her by themselves. But thankfully, they don't have to. As we already stated, Luffy on his own is more than enough to stop Kaido, which means that Zoro could help handle Big Mom as well. With 3 supernovas on the battlefield, the outcome of this fight is obvious, and Big Mom would quickly be dealt with. Before we continue, I want to ask you guys something. Have you ever wanted to visit Japan? Yeah, I did too. But it's really tough communicating with people there if you don't know the language, and I don't. Thankfully, that's where LingoPie, the sponsor of today's video, comes in. Basically, LingoPie is an app that makes learning a language fun by letting you watch your favorite shows in order to learn. For example, I started watching Saiki-K, and while I did, LingoPie showed me both Japanese and English subtitles at the same time. This makes learning really fun, and it's so easy to stay consistent. Also, if I ever see some especially hard words, I can save them, and LingoPie will make sure to teach them to me afterward. Click my link in the description now to get a 7-day free trial plus a special discount. どうぞ試してみてください。本当に失うものは何もありませんよ. Not bad for the rookies, but now the old generation would bring 2 more fighters into the mix, Silver's Rayleigh and 𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐴𝐵𝐴. Is there anything supernovas can do against these guys? This is a good time to specify that for this video, I'll assume that all previous generation characters are in their prime. This wasn't important for Kaido and Big Mom since they're still at the peak of their strength, but it's really important when talking about someone like Rayleigh. Anyway, the problem for the new generation in this stage is that only Luffy can win a one-on-one fight against any of these guys. This means that he would have to stall at least 2 people by himself in order to give his teammates a fighting chance. Although this sounds incredibly tough, he did hold off multiple elders at the same time during Egghead, so he can definitely pressure both Kaido and Garvin and keep them from interfering with the others. This would mean that Law, Kid, and Zoro would have to go against Big Mom and Rayleigh, which is going to be really tough. Kid and Law could try and take on Big Mom again, which would leave Zoro and Rayleigh to duel each other one-on-one. At first glance, this sounds outrageous. There's no way Zoro is beating Rayleigh, right? Well, after giving it some thought, this fight would be way closer than some of you may think. You see, on Egghead, Zoro beat Rob Lucci, who has become many times more powerful than he was on Enies Lobby. And after that, he still had the strength to briefly clash against Nasjuro, which is extremely impressive. Now, we don't really know how strong Prime Rayleigh was, but he was for sure around Admiral level at least, which means that he could probably defeat Zoro, but it would take him some time. Meanwhile, Kid and Law would greatly struggle against Big Mom, while Luffy would give his all to hold Kaido and Garvin at bay. All of these 3 fights look very shaky for the new generation pirates, and after some time, one of them is bound to break. This would most likely be Luffy, who would get tired after going all out for quite some time, and once that happens, his friends would go down too, resulting in a brutal loss. But now let's give the new gen the biggest boost so far, Blackbeard and 𝐂𝐮, who are really going to shake things up. One of the biggest advantages for the new gen here is Blackbeard's ability to nullify other people's fruits simply by touching them, which should allow him to defeat any devil fruit user. I think the best matchup for him would be someone like Big Mom, who I'm pretty confident he can defeat. Out of the current old generation pirates, she's the one that relies on her devil fruits the most, and having that taken away from her would mean that her homies like Zeus and Prometheus would disappear too, leaving her with only Haki to fight. While that's happening, 𝐂𝐮 would engage Rayleigh, and this battle could go both ways, because 𝐂𝐮 is proven to be much stronger than we thought since he almost defeated Garp by himself. But just to make sure he wins, Kid can also help him out. Luffy can relax, since this time he only has to fight Kaido while Zoro and Law would be left to take care of Gaban. Gaban's strength is also a mystery to us, but he should be weaker than Rayleigh, and if Zoro and Law engage him together, I don't think he stands a chance. This means that the new generation takes an easy win here, but will that still be the case once Whitebeard and Odin join in the third stage? With the number of fighters on both sides equal now, the new generation is now in big trouble, but there might be something they can do about it. Firstly, even though it would be great for Blackbeard to disable Whitebeard's fruit, I don't see him winning that fight, which is why I'll still put him up against Big Mom for the time being. Then, since we already discussed how powerful 𝐂𝐮 is, I can easily see him holding his own against Odin. You see, people often think that Odin is stronger than he actually is, due to the fact that he could have defeated Kaido 20 years ago. However, in those 2 decades, Kaido has gotten much stronger, and also unlocked his hybrid form, which means that Odin might not actually be as strong as Kaido as we've seen on Wano. The strongest old generation pirate currently in the fight is Whitebeard, which means that the only person who can stand up to him would be Luffy. Now, you could say that Luffy is easily stronger since he managed to defeat Kizaru while Whitebeard was still struggling to even land a hit on him. However, Whitebeard was already old and sick at that point, so it's really not a fair comparison. The prime Whitebeard, on the other hand, is basically on the same level as Roger, and I'm not quite sure Luffy is at that level yet. But let's leave this battle for now and see who the last 3 new gen pirates would fight. So instead of fighting separate battles, I think Kid and Law would have a better chance surviving a 2 versus 2 against Rayleigh and Gaban. The chances of them ever winning this fight are extremely slim, as their opponents were on the same crew together for years and probably work really well together. This would only leave Kaido and Zoro, and yeah, you can probably see where this is going. Although Zoro is pretty strong and would definitely be able to injure Kaido, realistically there's no way he could actually defeat him. So, in the end, it's most likely that Zoro would go down first, and it wouldn't take long for Gaban and Rayleigh to also win their fight. The winners would then split up to help with the other ongoing fights, and soon after, no one from the new generation would be standing. So you're probably wondering, who else could we possibly add to the new generation in order to help them defeat these monsters? Well, I think I know just the right duo. Red Hair Shanks and Ben Beckman. I know Shanks is technically a generation between the two and has been part of the Roger Pirates, but he is a lot younger than anyone from the old generation and has only become a big pirate in recent times. So for those reasons, I'll count him as part of the new generation. Now, having Shanks with the new generation is great because he can basically beat anyone we put him up against, even someone like Kaido. Aside from speculating that Shanks is this unbeatable Haki god, there's some actual evidence to support this. Remember when Shanks stopped Kaido from coming to Marineford? Well, there's 2 things that could have happened here. They either fought or talked. Considering Shanks arrived completely unscathed, if they fought, he demolished Kaido. And if they just talked and came to some sort of an agreement, that proves that even the Kaido knew he shouldn't fight Shanks. Anyway, as for other fights, I'm not sure if Ben could go against Rayleigh alone, so I'll have him fight Odin since I believe that would be a closer matchup. I mean, the guy was able to make Kizaru feel uneasy, so he's obviously incredibly powerful. The biggest problem here, though, for the new gen is Prime Whitebeard, but I think Law and Blackbeard working together could easily handle him, especially considering that Blackbeard could nullify his devil fruit. Luffy could take on Big Mom, which shouldn't be a problem, while Zoro could take on Gaban, which seems realistic. This only leaves 𝐂𝐮 and Kid to go against Rayleigh, and I'm sorry to say it, but I don't think Rayleigh is surviving this one. The new generation will start dominating the battlefield with Shanks and Luffy quickly finishing off their opponents. This would allow them to help their teammates, and before long, the old generation would be obliterated. Yep, that was a clean victory for the new generation, but they shouldn't celebrate just yet, because the old gen still has 2 more stages left, and in the next one, the Pirate King, Goldie Roger, and Shiki would be joining their ranks. Okay, this is pretty terrifying for the new gen, so let's start by taking care of the biggest problem first. Roger. Shanks came from Roger's ship and is in many ways like him, one of those being strength, swordsmanship, and overall hockey mastery. He even learned Divine Departure from Roger, and the attack looked just as powerful as the original when he used it against Kid. So I think it's fair to say that these two are somewhat equal. Then 𝐂𝐮 and Ben will team up to hopefully defeat 𝗕𝗲, 𝐿𝐵𝐴, and Odin. Yeah, I know it sounds impossible, but it's the only way if the new generation wants to win. As for 𝗕𝐾𝐾, I have reason to believe he's not as strong as the Emperors. He had the biggest fleet in the show, which made him super scary, but other than that, he doesn't seem to be on the same level as the other X-Rocks pirates like Kaido, Big Mom, and Whitebeard. And even though it's not canon, it doesn't help that he lost to pre-time skip Luffy in the movie. So, assuming that he really is weaker than the Emperors, that would mean that Kid and Law would be more than enough to deal with him. This time Luffy will have to go alone against Whitebeard as there's just no other way, while Zoro and Blackbeard will join forces to fight Kaido and Big Mom together. And even though these are the best possible matchups for the new generation, they're still not in a good spot. The first fight to be over would probably be Luffy versus Whitebeard, as Luffy's stamina simply wouldn't allow him to keep up with Prime Whitebeard, and soon enough he'd be crushed. By this time, 𝗂𝐮 and Ben would have defeated 𝐿𝐵𝐴 and maybe even Odin, but with Whitebeard coming to assist, they would have no chance. Blackbeard and Zoro would manage to take down Big Mom, but they wouldn't have enough strength to beat Kaido too. Once the old generation wins these fights, everything will start crumbling for the rookies and they would soon be wiped out. With this loss, the new generation is getting their final two fighters, Mihawk and Crocodile. Can the new generation finally win now that they're at their full strength? Even with more fighters on the battlefield than the last time, Shanks would have to go alone against Rogers so that the others could have a chance at winning. Mihawk will take on the opposing strongest swordsman, 𝗕𝗲, and I believe these two would also even out. Now, Luffy couldn't beat Prime Whitebeard alone last time, but we also can't spare any strong fighters to give him, so the only help Luffy can get is Crocodile. And I know what you're thinking, Crocodile lost to pre-time skip Luffy, so he would be pretty much useless, right? Well, not really. You see, after the time skip, a lot of characters became way stronger than they were before, like Lucci, Kaku, Dory, and Brogy. Considering Crocodile's bounty is now almost 2 billion berries, he must have gotten incredibly strong too. Also, he has some previous experience with fighting Whitebeard, so this is probably the fight that will let him shine the brightest. Moving on, Kid and Law would go against 𝗕𝐾𝐾, which seems pretty reasonable. Ben will take on Odin, and Zoro will take on 𝐿𝐵𝐴. Hard fights, but it should be doable. That leaves us with only 2 fighters on each side. Now, it would be best for Blackbeard to just fight and beat Big Mom like before, but that would leave 𝗂𝐮 to fend off Kaido, which doesn't seem good for 𝗂𝐮. So I think they would have better chances fighting together in a 2 versus 2. This would be the toughest challenge for both generations so far, and it would be a really long fight. However, I believe that the first person to go down would be 𝗕𝗲, as I just can't imagine him beating Kid and Law. The Supernova duo would spend no time recovering from the fight and would immediately jump in to help Mihawk in his duel against 𝗕𝗲. As this is happening, Whitebeard would be defeated as well, but he'd take Crocodile down with him. On the other side of the battlefield, Roger would probably gain a small upper hand against Shanks, but Luffy would arrive just in time to save him and help him defeat Roger. With their strongest fighters gone, the remaining old generation members would be easily wiped out, which scores a hard-earned victory for the new gen. But they'll soon regret this. You see, in the last stage, the old generation is going to add just one person instead of 2. Why? Well, because this one person is more than enough to completely humiliate all of these rookies. Rocksteady Xebec. The pirate so terrifying that he was erased from history and took both the Pirate King and the strongest marine at the same time. The only possible way the new gen defeats this guy is if Shanks and Luffy team up against him. However, the problem is even if these two are enough to defeat Rocks, what about everyone else? I mean, with Luffy and Shanks gone, can anyone else defend against Roger, Whitebeard, and the others? No matter how I try to spin this, the old generation's strength is simply too much for the youngsters to handle, and every single scenario would end with a devastating loss for them. Click on this video next, where we explained what would have happened if all 4 emperors together attacked the world government. Go on, click it.